the island of creativity. AKA, the curse of creativity is the challenges and rewards of being creative. The idea that creativity is a high-risk, high-reward trait. It also explores the idea that creativity is linked to mental illness and psychological disorders. Chaos. Creative people have a heightened ability to be aware of chaos, which can lead to a fragmented identity. Novelty. Creative people have a heightened ability to see things outside the box, but this can also lead to chaos and mental illness. Structure. Creative people need to find a way to structure their chaos to make it understandable and shareable. Value. Creativity is highly valued in society, but it can be difficult to achieve recognition for creative work. Sacrifice. Creative people may be sacrificial pawns in the Darwinian game for survival. The idea that creativity is a gift that comes with a cost. It explores the idea that creativity is a part of who we are and that it can give us a sense of fulfillment. The torture of being a creative. The multifaceted struggles of creative professionals. While creativity is often seen as a gift, for many, it also presents a unique set of challenges and pressures. The pursuit of a creative career or passion can be accompanied by intense struggles, both internal and external, that can feel like a torture at times. Common challenges faced by creatives. Creative blocks. When inspiration dries up, artists can find themselves in a rut, unable to generate new ideas or make progress on their projects. Psychologist Dr. Csikszentmihalyi suggests that finding a state of flow can help overcome these barriers, according to Headroom Mental Health. Perfectionism. Striving for an ideal outcome can lead to burnout and difficulty completing projects. Financial insecurity. Many creatives face irregular income streams and financial instability, leading to stress and anxiety. Balancing passion projects with profitable endeavors can be a significant challenge. Fear of rejection. Submitting work, seeking commissions, or even posting on social media can bring the risk of rejection, which can be disheartening for artists who have poured their heart into their creations. Author Brené Brown emphasizes that facing vulnerability is essential for creativity. Pressure to stay relevant. In a fast-paced creative landscape, artists may feel compelled to adapt their styles or chase trends to remain seen and valued. Marketing and self-promotion. Many creatives struggle with promoting their work, building a portfolio, or networking, particularly those who are introverted or uncomfortable with self-promotion. Isolation and loneliness. Artistic pursuits can often be solitary, leading to feelings of loneliness and isolation. Lack of career stability. The unpredictable nature of creative industries can lead to anxieties about long-term career stability. Criticism and judgment. Receiving negative feedback, whether from critics or the public, can impact an artist's self-esteem. Work-life balance. The freedom and passion often associated with creative work can blur the lines between professional and personal life, leading to imbalance and exhaustion. Navigating collaborations. Working with others, galleries, clients, collaborators, requires negotiation and communication, which can be challenging and lead to creative disagreements. Imposter syndrome. Doubting one's skills, accomplishments, or legitimacy can be a common struggle for creatives. The tortured artist stereotype. The stereotype of the tortured artist suggests that artistic greatness is inherently linked to suffering and mental illness. However, this narrative can be problematic and lead to the romanticization of mental health struggles within the creative community. While some artists may grapple with mental health challenges, it's crucial to remember that these struggles are not a prerequisite for creativity. Navigating mental health challenges. Creative professionals are susceptible to the same mental health concerns as the general population, according to Zencare. Some studies have indicated higher rates of conditions like depression and bipolar disorder among artists, though this may also be linked to factors like the solitary nature of the work or feelings of being misunderstood. It's important to recognize that mental health struggles are not a necessary part of the creative process, and that help is available. Effective strategies for managing stress, anxiety, and burnout include setting realistic goals and deadlines, maintaining a work-life balance, practicing self-care, such as exercise, healthy eating, and adequate sleep, seeking support from peers, mentors, or mental health professionals, learning to say no to overwhelming commitments, maintaining artistic integrity amidst commercial pressures. The pressure to commercialize work can also feel like a torture for creatives. Balancing artistic integrity with the need to earn a living often requires careful navigation. Commercialization versus authenticity. Prioritizing market value over creative expression can lead to work that feels inauthentic or derivative. Trends versus unique voice. The desire to stay relevant can lead artists to chase trends, potentially diluting their unique artistic voice. External validation. Social media and commercial success can create a drive for external validation that detracts from the intrinsic joy of creation. Maintaining artistic integrity involves staying true to one's unique voice and vision, even when faced with commercial demands, notes Vea. This can involve setting boundaries, seeking collaborations aligned with one's values, and continuously reflecting on one's artistic principles. Conclusion. The path of a creative can be challenging and emotionally taxing. However, by understanding and addressing these challenges through self-care, building support networks, prioritizing artistic integrity, and seeking professional help when needed, creatives can navigate the difficulties and continue to create meaningful and impactful work. Why are creative people so lazy? The perception that creative people are lazy can stem from several factors, but it's important to unpack this stereotype. Here are some reasons why this idea might exist. Different work styles. Creative individuals often have unique work rhythms and may work in bursts of intense focus followed by periods of rest or inactivity. This can be misinterpreted as laziness. Non-traditional schedules. Many creatives thrive outside of the typical 9-to-5 structure. Their peak productivity might occur at unconventional hours, leading others to perceive them as less industrious. Mental exhaustion. Creative work can be mentally taxing. The cognitive demands of brainstorming, problem-solving, and generating new ideas can lead to fatigue, prompting breaks that might look like idleness. Value of downtime. Many creative processes benefit from downtime and reflection. What appears as laziness may actually be a crucial part of the creative process, allowing for incubation and inspiration. Societal expectations. Cultural norms often equate productivity with visible activity. When creative individuals don't conform to these expectations, their work may be undervalued or dismissed. Struggles with motivation. Like anyone, creatives can struggle with motivation or procrastination, especially when faced with self-doubt or perfectionism, which creative people tend to be messier because their brains may work a little differently. They may question rules, blur boundaries, and follow their curiosity instead of instruction manuals. Also, messy people aren't necessarily locked into seeing things the right way, and that flexibility can be great for innovation. To periods of inactivity. In summary, while it may appear that creative people are lazy, their approaches to work and creativity often differ from conventional norms, which can lead to misunderstandings about their productivity and work ethic. Creative people tend to be messier because their brains may work a little differently. They may question rules, blur boundaries, and follow their curiosity instead of instruction manuals. Also, messy people aren't necessarily locked into seeing things the right way, and that flexibility can be great for innovation. Creative individuals are often misunderstood because their way of thinking, problem-solving, and interacting with the world differs significantly from those who adhere to more conventional norms. This difference can lead to misinterpretations, frustration, and even rejection from those who don't share the same creative mindset. Here's a breakdown of why this misunderstanding occurs. 1. Divergent thinking styles. Out-of-the-box thinking. Creative people tend to question established norms and explore unconventional solutions. They aren't constrained by the box and may not even recognize its existence. Focus on possibilities. Instead of seeking closure and order, creatives are drawn to possibilities and exploring the unknown. They are comfortable with ambiguity and uncertainty, which can be unsettling for those who prefer clear, defined structures. Discomfort with the status quo. Their willingness to challenge the status quo and question authority can be perceived as disruptive or even threatening to those who benefit from or are comfortable with the existing system. 2. Different values and priorities. Emphasis on imagination. Creative individuals often prioritize imagination, innovation, and exploration over strict adherence to rules and procedures. They are drawn to the realms of what could be rather than being solely focused on what is. Tolerance for ambiguity. They are more comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity, which can be challenging for those who thrive on predictability and control. Passion and intensity. Creatives often approach their work with passion and intensity, which can be misconstrued as being erratic or overly emotional. Social and cultural factors. 1. Perception of risk. Creative endeavors often involve risk-taking and the possibility of failure. This can be a source of anxiety for those who prefer to play it safe. 2. Fear of change. Creative people can be agents of change, and their ideas can challenge existing social structures and norms. This can be unsettling for those who prefer stability and predictability. 3. Lack of understanding. There's a common misconception that creativity is limited to artistic expression. In reality, creativity is a valuable asset in many fields, including science, business, and technology. 4. Difficulty fitting into traditional systems. Bureaucracy and rigidity. Creative individuals often find it difficult to thrive in bureaucratic and overly structured environments. Their need for autonomy and freedom can clash with the constraints of such systems. 5. Communication barriers. Creative individuals may use language and communication styles that are not easily understood by others, leading to misunderstandings. Exclusion and isolation. Because of their different way of thinking and operating, creative people can sometimes be excluded from mainstream social circles, leading to feelings of isolation and misunderstanding. Why being creative is such a curse. We have all heard the saying, tortured artist. It's a commonly used phrase to describe the frustrations an artist has with people who don't quite understand them. This frustration typically leads to isolation, depression, and many other expensive emotions. In my opinion, this stereotype doesn't even scratch the surface of what a creative person lives day to day. This is why I am going to make my own label, Cursed Creative. What is a cursed creative? A cursed creative is a person who lives to create. It could be music, painting, writing, editing, design, acting, or coding. There are hundreds of outlets for a creative to use to drive their passion. And the curse is it's never enough. There is no final piece of work, no final applause. There is only an appetite that is never satisfied. Like a vampire with better taste in clothes is the life of a cursed creative. When I first started working with creative minds, it was a challenge for me, the writer of this psychological professional, to understand what drives their passion, or more appropriately, their hunger. I have done a lot of thinking on this matter, and here is what I have concluded. Do they care about money? In short, no. A true creative wants to share with people around them the way they see the world. In many cases, they knowingly understand the profession they are entering doesn't result in a big salary or $1 million payday. The irony to me is that most of the richest people in the world are creative minds that were either lucky enough to commercialize their vision at the right time or were able to surround themselves with business-minded people to turn their talent into money. Either way, I know for sure money is not the root of why they are creative, and it certainly isn't the motivation behind their passion. Do they care about fame? Yes, but in a good way. We all appreciate someone's desire to be famous. It's natural for any person to want to be known and respected by thousands or millions of people around the world. It's even more important for someone who creates something to share it with the world. Fame to a creative is more like acknowledgement. It is the assurance of sharing their creation, and not so much the red carpet, take pictures of me fame. The only real exception is performers, actors, and musicians, because they personify their creativity. In some way, they are the most cursed creatives because their art is them. They don't paint the art, they become the art. So the obvious question is, why are many creatives still unhappy or unsatisfied after having success? Why do musicians who perform to thousands of fans screaming their lyrics are still depressed backstage? Why do actors who perform lead roles in Oscar-winning films still find themselves on the other side of a needle? The answer is not easy to comprehend or explain. It is simply a curse. When you are a creative being, you are only fulfilled when you are creating. It is a never-ending cycle. And no matter what you create, no matter how magnificent, popular, or profitable, you will wake up the next day wanting more. Of course, it's not all bad. There are a few positives in being a creative. Here is a short list. You will experience life in a way no one else can comprehend. You will change the lives of everyone who knows you by sharing your experiences through a creative outlet. You will change the world. Although many famous artists have struggled with depression, not all great art is created during a depressive episode. With the help of a qualified mental health professional, you or your loved one can enjoy the creative process and good mental health. The relationship between art, depression, and creativity has intrigued psychologists for centuries, and the relationship appears to be bidirectional. Poets, artists, and musicians express their struggles with angst through their craft, and art is a creative and productive means of therapy to improve mental health. Here, how the connection between art and depression may influence you or your loved one. The link between art and depression. A few of the creative minds that have struggled with depression include a vast array from Vincent van Gogh, Edvard Munch, Halsey, Billie Eilish, and Ernest Hemingway, to name a few. Each of these created important work in their field, and each struggled at one time or another with depression. There are a few characteristics that may explain why writers and artists struggle with mental health issues. Some believe that to see the world on a broad spectrum, an artist must have an open mind, which in turn opens their thought process to ideas and situations most do not consider. Other experts believe that artists have a deeper level of intuition that helps them express deeper feelings with increased sensitivity. This may make life more challenging. Additionally, some artists appear to struggle with melancholy or a gloomy state of mind that, when habitual or chronic, is expressed as depression. A person who expresses their deepest thoughts and emotions through artistic expression is often more vulnerable to the world and may seek to push their boundaries. At the same time, this may also raise the potential for experiencing mental health challenges. Many artists with depression experience major depressive disorder, which is a common and serious mental health condition that has the potential to become significantly worse without proper treatment. When left untreated, depression can lead to complications that include self-harm, thoughts of suicide, substance use disorder, social isolation, and relationship problems. Some artists believe they cannot express themselves creatively without experiencing deep dissatisfaction and emotional pain. Yet, the creative brain can produce ideas and thoughts from a variety of emotions along the spectrum. In other words, creativity comes not only from sadness and depression, but also elation and joy, or a state of contentment and emotional stability. Creativity can exist exactly where the artist wants to meet it. Although depression and mental health problems are common in artists, they are not essential to the creative process. When the experience of chronic sadness and depression becomes overwhelming, it can interfere with daily life and the expression of an artist's creative thoughts. Because depression is not essential for creativity, you or your loved one can get help for depression through skilled psychological care. The link between depression and creativity. The notion that mental health and creativity are inextricably linked has been so prevalent that it gave rise to terms like tortured artist. Yet, while artists who have struggled with mental health issues are fairly well known, Research linking creativity and mental illness is inconclusive. In addition to this, the creative experience can sometimes be misinterpreted as mood disturbances. For example, an intense creative episode may be exhibited as rapidly occurring ideas and the reduced need for sleep and food, which coincidentally mimics hypomania or manic symptoms. A 2017 study noted that the empirical evidence linking creativity to psychopathology is limited. After a review of the literature, the scientist found that the strength and pattern of the relationship between mood disorders and creativity appeared to rely on the approach the researchers used. Research analyzing the relationship must also confront several challenges. For example, how is creativity defined? What comparison group should be used? And what's the optimal study sample? How the researchers answer those questions has a unique and defined impact on the results. Although it appears a significant group of artists has struggled with mood disorders and mental illness, their mental health conditions may also have been triggered by how artists prefer to work. Most great artists prefer working without any distractions. This allows them to experiment, contemplate, and express their emotions. However, this can create a situation in which the artist is misunderstood. Artists who feel misunderstood may have a harder time connecting with others, which leads to loneliness and strained relationships. People who are depressed often have a different perspective of the world than people who are not depressed, which some believe can lead to more creative ideas. On the other hand, the question arises, which came first, the ideas or the need for isolation? One of the most dynamic poets of the 20th century was Sylvia Plath, whose life and artistic journey fundamentally illustrate this basic question. As an early teen, her work won numerous awards in national magazines, yet it wasn't until she was an undergraduate that she began experiencing symptoms of severe manic depression. Although Plath's depression was not the result of isolation, her early work, before she experienced symptoms, was acclaimed and awarded. Creatives are curious about everything. They test boundaries, not to be rebellious, but to simply explore, to understand, to learn. Creative people make others uncomfortable. Often more daring and willing to fail, they are unique, true individuals, and this often threatens the status quo. To be creative is to be misunderstood. I have this belief that creative people are more misunderstood than normal people. Why is this? Maybe it's because creative people think outside the box. The truth is often they are often unaware such a box even exists. Or maybe it has to do with the fact that creative people sometimes ask dangerous questions, questions that can sometimes sound silly or antagonistic, but that's not the case. Creatives are curious about everything. They test boundaries, not to be rebellious, but to simply explore, to understand, to learn. Creative people make others uncomfortable. Often more daring and willing to fail, they are unique, true individuals, and this often threatens the status quo. The threat of the creative individual. Because they are so different, creatives can be perceived as threats to the institution, which is unfortunate because so many organizations are in dire need of more creativity. They're just scared of the people who might bring it. The world is full of bureaucracies and programs, and because of this, creatives can find themselves frustrated with their attempts to fit into such systems. They just don't. Sadly, this leads to them being excluded and feeling misunderstood. At best, they are as a means to an end, a cog in the machine of producing propaganda for the cause. At worst, they are perceived as a threat that needs to be eliminated. So what do we do about this? Unfortunately, there isn't a pretty way out of this predicament. To be creative is to be misunderstood. That's all there is to it. So the question is, will do you the hard work of not fitting in so you can create something that matters, or merely blend in with the masses? What alternative is there in a world of conformists and wannabes? Because who really wants to fit into a system that doesn't celebrate original thinking? And if it bugs you that this sort of activity is relegated to so-called creatives, as much as it bugs me, then maybe it's time you did something about it. Maybe it's time to be creative, time to be misunderstood. Time to create something worth noticing. Time to challenge the status quo. Whether you consider yourself creative or not, you can embrace your inner creativity and make your contribution. The world needs more trailblazers and fire starters, more trendsetters willing to buck the system and do something interesting. Dislike for creative ideas can stem from several factors. Fear of change. Creative ideas often challenge the status quo, and people may resist change due to fear of the unknown or potential negative outcomes. Cognitive dissonance. New ideas can conflict with existing beliefs or values, leading to discomfort. As Asimov declared in his famous 1959 essay on creativity and idea generation, the world in general disapproves of creativity. The idea that both current and past cultures tend to disapprove of creativity might initially seem counterintuitive. After all, don't we all aspire to be more creative? In popular culture, creativity is often held up as a virtue. We celebrate the lives of history's great artists and iconoclasts and search for secrets to creative brilliance. But as Asimov explains, the fact that we celebrate new and original ideas after they've become widely accepted doesn't mean that we truly embrace creativity. In fact, the opposite may be true. Unconventional ideas that break from tradition or challenge our existing ways of thinking, which nearly any important creative achievements do, often push us out of our psychological comfort zone. As a general rule, we don't like things that challenge our habitual ways of thinking, which makes creative work a dangerous endeavor. Why are paradigm-shifting ideas throughout history consistently and predictably ridiculed and rejected? It's because, as a culture and as individuals, we're deeply biased against creativity. This creativity bias makes sense if we look at the way our brains are wired. By nature, human beings are highly risk-averse. And when there is a motivation to reduce uncertainty, creativity biases are activated on both individual and institutional levels. Across the board, people, not to mention institutions and decision-makers, deny creative ideas, even when they explicitly cite creativity as being among their goals or values. Research conducted by organizational psychologists at Cornell University found that this implicit creativity bias causes us to take a negative view of creative ideas and projects, relative to those that are more practical. The study, conducted by psychologist Jennifer Mueller and colleagues, showed that the creativity bias interfered with participants' ability to recognize an original idea. This bias indicates a fascinating paradox at the heart of our common attitudes toward creativity. At the same time that we desire creativity, we also fear it. This widespread bias then acts as a concealed barrier that innovators must be prepared to confront when attempting to gain acceptance for novel ideas. It's usually only after an idea has gained acceptance and recognition that we applaud the idea and its creator. The Cornell psychologists noted that regardless of how open-minded people are in general, they still seek to reduce uncertainty in their lives. Most people prefer what is safe and conventional, and may unconsciously shy away from creative ideas because they are new, novel, and potentially uncomfortable. However, because the bias is not overt, we're typically unable to recognize it in ourselves. The study found that while most people say they feel positively toward creativity, when asked to judge the desirability of various ideas, they overwhelmingly reveal an implicit bias toward the practical over the novel. The researchers note a deep irony here. It is often uncertainty that stimulates the search for and generation of creative ideas, but it is also our fear of uncertainty that renders us less able to recognize creative ideas. It's usually only after an idea has gained acceptance and recognition that we applaud the idea and its creator. According to Berkeley business professor Bari Staw, an expert on creativity and organization innovation, when it comes to creativity, we tend to celebrate the victor. When a creative work earns the approval of cultural gatekeepers and is integrated into the mainstream, then we applaud the ingenuity of its creator. Think about it. We study history's great creative minds and the brilliant ideas they contributed to the world. But how often do we pause to consider the resistance they encountered and the enormous sacrifices they made to achieve creative success? Even less often do we consider the failed creative projects that paved the way for those successes. Conformity, of course, tends to get in the way of creativity. People by nature are highly influenced by the opinions and behaviors of others, and conformity occurs when we change the way we think or act to imitate others. Still, conformity isn't inevitable. In fact, most children are natural nonconformists. Unfortunately, either at home or in school, or both, many children grow up in environments that devalue independent and creative thought and instead reward imitation, memorization, and rote learning. We study history's great creative minds and the brilliant ideas they contributed to the world. But how often do we pause to consider the resistance they encountered and the enormous sacrifices they made to achieve creative success? Research by psychologists Daphne Buchsbaum and Alison Gopnik found that common teaching methods that emphasize direct instruction, those in which the child is shown what to do rather than given the opportunity to figure it out for herself, can hamper the child's ability to solve problems independently and creatively, and may instead encourage mindless imitation. While this method may allow the student to acquire the information more quickly, she won't be learning the important real-world skills of asking questions and sleuthing out new information about a problem. In fact, research has shown that creative students tend not to be favored by teachers. Judgments of a teacher's favorite student were negatively correlated with creativity, and judgments of a teacher's least favorite student were positively correlated with creativity. While teachers said that they liked creative students, they, somewhat bafflingly, defined creativity using terms like well-behaved and conforming. When given adjectives, more typically used to describe creative people, the teachers said that they disliked these kinds of students. But when students are encouraged to exercise their creativity and to engage imaginatively with the materials, the results can be impressive. Research by Robert Sternberg and others shows that students who are taught using creative methods learn more and engage with information more actively. In what is now the most watched TED Talk of all time, Sir Ken Robinson argues that the problem is that from an early age, kids are being taught to fear making mistakes, but without learning to play with different solutions and ways of thinking, which will inevitably lead to incorrect answers, they won't be prepared for the uncertainty and the new challenges of the changing world. As Robinson puts it, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. Challenges for creative people. Creativity is a tremendous gift that is so important in our world today. At the same time, I would argue that our society is relatively poorly set up to support and nurture creative people. Highly creative people have to wrestle with a number of challenges that, in my view, are not talked about very often and are not well understood. When we've been in the dark for so long, merely hearing these issues articulated can be valuable. The sooner that we understand them and start dealing with them, the further we will be on our path toward all the clarity, fulfillment, and success that we want. The purpose of this article is to help you think about these issues so that you can fulfill your purpose, reach your full potential, and maximize your contribution. A quick note on definitions. I hesitate to draw this distinction between creative people and others, given that, as Sir Ken Robinson points out, we are all creative. Nevertheless, some people do have more creative temperaments than others, and this has significant implications for their well-being and the realization of their potential. To be clear, I am not saying that these people are better than anyone else. We all have gifts and challenges in different places. Creative people and systems. Many of the challenges that creative people face stem from the fact that creative people don't fit well within systems. Systems, by definition, cannot evaluate creative people, and they cannot nurture them. That's because creative people do new things, and they engage in all of the behaviors that go along with this, like questioning authority and sticking out from the crowd. In contrast, systems channel people towards doing existing things. Unfortunately, creative people can't avoid being processed by systems. Every child is required by law to attend the school system, but for creative people, the school system can be very destructive. We're also born into another system known as the family system. Families have multi-generational trauma and often very rigid cultures. Creative people often have a greater awareness of these things, and sometimes have the courage and need to question and challenge them. Creative people often are seeing and experiencing the world around them at a level of depth that is not seen, tolerated, or nurtured by their family environment. And if a creative individual has issues with either of these systems, they will likely be forced to interface with the mental health system. This is another system that doesn't fit creative people very well, in my opinion. In particular, the mental health system will take these very nuanced issues that creative people are dealing with, that have to do with their interactions with their environment, and slap a diagnostic label on them, essentially labeling them as diseased or disordered. By medicalizing and decontextualizing our experience, we are disempowered from actually dealing with our true situation. This also stigmatizes and silences us, which marginalizes and limits our contributions. In general, systems tell people what they must do and define the reality they occupy. They delineate things like how to get rewarded and what the punishments for noncompliance are. Thus, systems channel people into already existing pathways of living. They tell people pretty much exactly what they need to do. This doesn't work for creative people because creative people do new things. They might create new systems, but they won't thrive in old ones. Something that may obscure understanding of this issue is that, in our culture, we often have sterilized ideas of creativity. This can ultimately serve to confuse and marginalize creative people. Creativity often gets defined quite narrowly. For example, there might be art classes in the school system. This then allows authority figures to say that creativity is valued and fostered, even if, say, the art classes themselves, like the rest of school, are about obeying orders. But true creativity isn't really about what you do, in such a narrow sense. Creativity is about doing new things. It's about discovery. So here is an example where systems have defined even creativity in a way that doesn't necessarily work for creative people. Because creative people stand outside of the status quo, they often face a dilemma between following their true selves and getting along in the world as it exists. In other words, they grapple with, do I be who I am and not survive, or do I abandon who I am and my soul will die? If this describes you, don't worry, there are ways to work through this. Because of this issue, free and tolerant societies are those that are able to foster creativity well. More repressive societies are horrible for creative people. And as you can see, even many of the systems in relatively free societies can be very repressive. For example, the school system is extremely authoritarian. Additionally, the level of awareness of the environment matters when it comes to fostering creativity. Environments that have more awareness around dealing with emotional reactivity and becoming conscious of underlying pain are better for creativity. Environments characterized by denial in this regard are worse for creativity. This is because when creative people do things in the world that displace or challenge existing systems or ways of thinking, they trigger emotional reactivity in people. When people have invested their whole lives into some kind of paradigm, their egos are invested in it and will defend it. Therefore, if people have the awareness to transcend this reactivity when it arises, they will be less likely to attempt to suppress creative people. If they are in denial of that emotional reactivity in themselves and suppress it, then they will make their feelings about the creative person and try to deny and suppress them. It will just be their automatic, conditioned response. This kind of self-awareness, or spiritual work, is important for both creative and non-creative people. It's important to understand that institutions and systems function well, at least in the short term, when humans are highly standardized. Many intellectuals have remarked that our school system is designed not to truly educate people, but to fashion them so that they fit into the status quo. They create standardized human resources to be inputs for other systems. Creative people can only survive in these systems if they abandon who they are and exert an enormous amount of effort to modify themselves to fit in the system. But doing this makes them die inside and squanders their potential. Creative people achieve their potential when they claim their own inner authority, when they decide for themselves what is true, what is worth doing, etc. Systems tend to reject this and force people to accept an external authority's claims over these domains. Not only do you have to accept another's idea of what is true, but you also have to obey their orders. Creative people are also at odds with systems because they question authority. How can you explore and articulate the unknown if you can't question the known? You can't. But if you grow up in a school system, for example, where this is practically criminalized, then you can't step into your potential as a creative person. Creative people and the mental health system. Another challenge for creative people is that, when they are forced into systems that are harmful to them, they can have a variety of negative reactions. This variety of ways that creative people manifest their not fitting into existing systems that they are forced into is wildly misunderstood in our culture. These manifestations are arranged into constructs that help to perpetuate the status quo of those systems, rather than meeting the true needs of people. The mental health system plays a central role in this phenomenon by labeling the suffering individual as inherently disordered. It does this, as opposed to understanding and dealing with the underlying issue, which would implicate the environment. This approach stigmatizes and marginalizes the creative person, while shoring up the status quo and making life easier for those in charge. For example, in my view, ADHD symptoms are a common manifestation of creative people not fitting into outdated systems. In my opinion, there is a very large number of situations that can lead to so-called ADHD symptoms, including a dysfunctional family, where the creative person is feeling the truth of what's going on, that people are in denial of. Being forced to submit to the school system, which can be very painful when it squanders our potential and dumbs us down. The existential panic of being misunderstood by one's environment. Or a creative individual might be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder because their difficult emotions haven't been mirrored properly. Thus, the individual struggles to sufficiently self-soothe difficult emotions. Even though that emotional depth is a very valuable gift in many ways, if you don't have parents that can attune to you, it can lead to issues like anxiety or depression. Or one could get an oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis. This might not really be oppositionality, but rather a person reacting to being forced to act against their own interests. Is it really pathological to resist an authority figure in such a situation? The story here is that the mental health system often doesn't work for creative people because it doesn't reflect the truth of what's going on for us. And this dynamic alone can cause anger and reactivity because there are people with power over us who lack the awareness or insight to understand what's actually going on for us. I describe this phenomenon in more detail here. Particularly as children, these diagnoses can make us think there's something wrong with us, when in reality we're just coming up against a world that doesn't understand us nor is suited to us. And as a creative person, your task is, in part, to validate yourself, heal yourself, empower yourself, and possibly help to build new systems that serve people better. As you can see, the people that more seamlessly fit into and perpetuate the status quo erect these stories about creative people based on a complete misunderstanding of them. These people may see all the things the creative people do as a part of something wrong with them. The not wanting to merely conform to systems, the thinking differently, the questioning things, the possible mental health symptoms of alienation. And with these narratives, they often project their own shame that they're in denial of onto these creative people. The most dangerous thing for a creative person is to buy into these stories and accept these people's authority. We can get very brainwashed by this if we don't have anyone around us to validate the truth of it. Other challenges for creative people. Connection to one's gut feelings is incredibly important for creative people. Creativity happens largely by following one's intuition, and intuition is a feeling-based faculty. The challenge is that we live in a world where disconnection from one's feelings and body is the norm. Our society is very much focused on cognition, thinking, and ego. Creativity, on the other hand, is about feeling, intuition, and the heart. These are dismissed and belittled in our culture. Thus, this is another important area in which creative people are likely not supported or understood by their environment. It can also be scary to step into this way of operating in the world, because it's different from the social norm and nonconformity can be very difficult. Along with this, if we can't be with our feelings and nurture them, we can get hurt. This can then be misunderstood and pathologized by our mental health system. A pattern for creative people is that they often need different frameworks and paradigms for life than their environment offers. This is a central aspect of what makes being a creative individual difficult. One key paradigm in our culture is that health and well-being are defined in terms of conformity. It's about conforming to the narrow metrics of your environment. And the mental health industry largely functions to help people adjust to the status quo. This is a phenomenon that Erich Fromm wrote about in his magnum opus, The Sane Society. The mental health industry will, for the most part, make the situation about why there's something wrong with you for not conforming. It will assume that you not fitting in is evidence of your pathology, when the truth is that being forced to fit in is the cause of your pathology. But creative people, by definition, don't conform. Rather than fitting in and conforming, creative people fulfill their purpose when they realize their uniqueness and then find belonging that follows from this. They don't find true belonging by finding a corner of the status quo to fit in, abandoning who they truly are to do so. As a creative person, you are by definition seeing the world differently. It could be in a deeper way, a more comprehensive way, a more holistic way, a more critically thinking way, or maybe a more truth-seeking way. While this is a huge gift, it can create problems for us that we need to heal. If as a child there are people with power over you who can't mirror who you truly are, and maybe are invalidating or trying to have you conform to how they think, then you will be hurt. Creative people have to navigate a world that, in many ways, can be soul-killing. The current social order and culture is not particularly helpful for creative people, worse in some places than others. Yet, for the sake of the future of our species, we need to work towards changing this. It is through creativity that we will solve the massive challenges we face as a species.